Thank you so much, and it is a great honour and a privilege. And this program's been in the workings for a long time with the City of Vincent, and it's our big passion. So we're so excited to bring this to you. So this event is going to be punctuated with 4 hot off the press little videos that we did, and there's the wonderful film cameraman who put these amazing videos together. So we're going to punctuate today with those talks. We've got some amazing speakers, but I'm really setting the scene, so I'm going to fire off with the first bit, and that's the beautiful designs for the apartments that are in the process of being built at my property right now. And the architect, the building designer who has created this amazing vision, Matt, he'll be talking with you today. And today's really about, again, showing you some amazing examples of things that can be done. Okay, we've done that, and that's a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be going through today. Lots of stuff. You're going to be heads overflowing with exciting opportunities. So I love this part because we live in a world where we assume that what is the mainstream is the only way things can be done. And we live in a world where we have a few big developers who just want to roll out black and gold developments. And I'm going to say some fairly disparaging things about the way we develop in this part of the world. If I want to depress myself, I just go out to a new far-flung part of Perth, which was once a beautiful Banksia woodland. It's been flattened, they put a wall around it, they name it after the bushland that was there. So they'll call it Banksia Heights or Calendula Grove or something. But what we're left with is a shimmering sea of new houses, no trees. You're all here because you're pretty passionate about changing the way we develop. But the reality is those styles of development we are doing are not actually even meeting our needs. Who thought they'd be looking at a pie chart on a Saturday morning? Like, seriously? You're staying, so that's pretty cool. But what that's really showing you is that we actually, as a group of people living in this part of the world, only about a third of us actually need these enormous McMansions that we're told we need to build. Only a third. That means well over, if my maths is correct, I did go to Kwinana High, so it's a bit wobbly, but around 70% of us don't actually need these enormous houses, and yet that's what we're being told. And we have the biggest houses on the planet. Check it out. So there's the UK, Spain, France, Germany, and the average size of the houses there versus us. It's incredible, but no one ever tells you this because we have this big machine that wants to roll out and tell you, oh, you have to have big houses, they sell better, it's a good return on investment, and we get told this, but the reality is completely different. So have a look at the size. And one of the sad things that I've heard since the inception of that program, Neighbours, remember that show? We probably grew up watching that. The average floor size of the houses was below 200 square metres, and what people cited as the number of close connections they had with humans, with other people on the planet. They're strong, close connections. So what's happened since the inception of that program, Neighbours? I'm not saying that there's a connection with the two, but it's just a period of time. Over that 35-year period, the amount of floor space we have has gone up, but the amount of connections we have with human beings has gone down. So we've traded floor space for nourishing connections with human beings. And I'm going to say that fundamentally, what's driving a large part of that disconnection is we've been sold and we believe the idea that we have to have big houses. And this is your typical enormous house. And what they did is they put trackers on the people living in those houses. So you can see where most people are spending their time, and then you end up with ghost rooms. So someone is driving in a car to go to work to pay for a room that no one uses. And you start to really peel that back and go, well, why are we doing this? And there it is in all its glory, the McMansion, the trophy house. And you can see that fundamentally there are some massive problems with this, and I'm going to go through them. Firstly, big house means big mortgage. And we got away with it when we had record low interest rates. But what's the narrative that's coming out now? People are going to start defaulting on their mortgages. Well, because they've been sold this idea that they have to have these enormous houses. Big houses mean, as I said, less meaningful relationships. We literally are physically and metaphorically and spiritually pushing people away from our connections by building these enormous houses. And my big bugbear is that the big house means no garden. And the most catastrophic thing is when people give up and they just put pockets of artificial turf around their house. Going for artificial turf as a gardener, as someone who loves gardens, is like looking for love with a blow-up doll. You know, you can make it look as real as you like, but it is never going to be a substitute for the real thing. Isn't that right, Matt? Okay, but the other important thing is less garden means that firstly, we have a bigger house, bigger builds. You're going to have to spend money keeping it artificially cool and artificially warm. This cannot survive in Perth with a black roof. Like, seriously, what's that all about? Without air conditioning. And therefore, we have this program now where governments tell us, oh my God, we know you're hurting the pain of your power bills. Rather than saying, let's teach you to build smarter homes, we'll just give you money to overcome the burden of keeping this enormous energy guzzler in the black. And, oops, I have a few more things to say. Big house means big waste because, interestingly, we have some of the lowest life expectancies for houses in the Western world. The average house in WA only lasts 28 years. Now, if you come from other parts of the world with older cultures, European cultures, you'll know that some of those houses are hundreds of years old. And yet we believe you have to knock a perfectly good house down. That all mostly goes as C&D waste, construction and demolition waste. One of our biggest imports into our landfill was construction and demolition waste, and then we replace it with another house with all of its embodied waste and the carbon footprint. Big houses mean big kids too. Now, where I'm going with this, I've a friend who does postdoctoral studies on the links between early childhood development and links to green spaces. Real green, not plastic green. And what she's found really worryingly is that the bigger the house, the less of the garden. More likely is the kids spend time indoors, because what kid is going to be able to go out there and explore and lose themselves in the wildness of nature when that's the garden? So we end up with kids that are bigger, larger, more obesity, and that links to things like early childhood development, cognitive function, all of those different things. So we are compromising the very future of our children by building these enormous houses and denying them access to green spaces. It's very, very powerful. And the other thing, of course, is big houses mean less trees. And that links into the heat island effect. Has everyone heard of the heat island effect? You're an educated suite of people. You know this stuff. So why would we build houses with black roofs surrounded with artificial turf when we know our climate is going to get hotter and drier? It just makes no sense. And that just puts into perspective the size of the typical garage that we are being told we need to build for our houses. Again, a massive thing. And this is what we often end up with. This style of development. You could not live in that place without the air conditioner whirring away. So somewhere, coal is being burned, heating up the planet to keep dumb houses cool. And that is not sustainability. That is running at breakneck speed in the opposite direction from sustainability and resilience. Okay, so video number 1. Are you ready, you handsome men? Okay, so as I said, we've got 4 fantastic videos which are really introducing the new policy that the City of Vincent has progressed. Now, to put this into perspective, there's 2 very funky terms you're going to hear about: ESD, environmentally sustainable development, and life cycle analysis. So the City of Vincent is one of the first councils to enshrine as a new policy when mum and dad developers like yourself want to come and redevelop, they will now have to do an environmentally sustainable development and life cycle analysis assessment. And these videos are really trying to show you that far from being just bureaucratic red tape, this is actually going to open the door for you to do some really cool and exciting developments. So the 4 videos, as I said, we'll punctuate them through this talk for you today, are really about showcasing the exciting things that can occur. It's fair to say that housing in WA is broken. Now, that's a big statement, I know, but you only have to have a look around and the evidence is everywhere. We either clear bushland to put up a new suburb, complete with a treeless sea of shimmering roofs, or closer to home in Vincent, we see the precious green heart of our city chipped away. Houses, gardens, trees, and precious memories all lost as we make way for infill. There has to be a better way. Throw in the fact that all this typical infill is making our suburbs hotter, destroying community, fostering isolation, disconnection and loneliness, and you can see that we need a serious rethink about how we build in Vincent moving forward. Now, I'm not saying we don't develop, far from it. I mean, there's a growing demand to build within the City of Vincent. But what we can do is rethink our methods and priorities to get the best outcome for the landholder, the community, and for the environment. Fortunately, the City of Vincent, as one of WA's most progressive local governments, is developing a suite of targets aimed to give us the fabled win-win. And this is backed up by some of the most innovative, funky and highly sought after new homes, apartment buildings and medium density developments in Perth of late. Houses that meet the demands of a growing population with smart, sophisticated, connected and green developments, blending form and function to get a much better outcome for all. The principles of environmentally sustainable design, or ESD, have been incorporated into the city's planning approval processes. And this series of videos will take you on a step-by-step journey to help you assess your design, complete the form, and help you know how to achieve the set ESD benchmarks. Now, what does that mean? But most importantly, what does it mean to you, the prospective builder or renovator? Whilst it might feel like a bundle of red tape, this ESD assessment actually helps you unlock the door to a smarter, healthier, more comfortable and energy efficient home. We'll talk more about why this matters and the value placed on these homes as we take you on this short journey. A journey towards better and more sustainable housing in Vincent, inspiring and empowering you to design and create a better build.
In the City of Vincent, we've got a diversity of homes. We've got beautiful old character homes. We've got modern homes being built. We have extensions. All homes have the opportunity to consider small or big actions to make their home more sustainable. So the City of Vincent is really embarking on sustainable design principles, and we're here to help with those decisions that you can make around your home to make it a more comfortable place to live as our climate becomes warmer, our winters have more storms. These are the sorts of things that we do need to consider, which will help us as a community continue to be more sustainable and be prepared for the climate future.
All the information you need on developing differently and creating your own inspired infill is on the City of Vincent website. People have this image that a tree has to be the size of this beautiful mountain ash. That's at the Botanic Gardens in Christchurch. It's a gorgeous, sexy tree, but that's not really going to fit in many blocks in the town of Vincent, or the City of Vincent. So we have to be able to choose our plants carefully and retain them. And I love this photo here. I took this one just a couple of weeks ago because, again, we get this idea that you have to just sacrifice the environment to get the return on investment. But actually, when you think of the leafy green suburbs, those aspirational suburbs where we go, I'd love to live in those places there, guess what? They are filled with gorgeous manicured trees. So that gorgeous lemon scent, that's a spotted gum there, that has an arborist who's been managing that tree for those property owners for 35 years. So they have a regular process. It's just like you going to the doctor. They have a big file on you, hopefully not too big, and that's the same with that tree. They know about the tree's strengths and weaknesses, and they're managing that tree so it's healthier and it's staying there as good in green infrastructure. I heard that term a while ago, calling trees infrastructure, because the pointy head architects go, and engineers, not the architects, the engineers go, it's not infrastructure, so it's not important. Well, green infrastructure is critically important, so we can do that. But that's the reality of so much of our development. We just roll out these cookie cutter developments, and you could be blindfolded and parachuted into any new subdivision in WA or Australia. Take the blindfolds off and you go, I actually don't know where I am, because it all looks the same. And we wonder why our kids don't want to go outside. They don't want to explore. They don't develop that natural resilience, because that's the garden that's on offer. But we can put plants into small spaces, and if we do it well, we can do all sorts of different things. So these small trees, they've been there for 45 years. So they're small, they've been designed in that space, they're not lifting the pavement, they're not filling gutters, they can fill a really important role in that space. But we need to look after our trees as well. This is a gorgeous sugar gum near me, and you can see that it's been had what's called canopy thinning. So what's happened is, if you see a big storm, and the big iconic image we have when we've had a big storm, what's the iconic image we see splashed across the screens and the newspapers when there's been a big storm? tree fallen down, and God forbid it's hit the new BMW. And so we have this idea that trees are against us, and you have people who hate trees. And I have a friend who works for the city of Stirling, and there was a campaign to remove trees from these areas. People were trying to get rid of trees. It's because a lot of it is this idea trees are dangerous. Well, what we need to do is manage that canopy. So thinning out the canopy is an important thing that we can do. It's not lopping the tree or butchering it. It's an arborist going into the canopy, removing some of the weaker or diseased limbs. And what that does is frees the tree up. But secondly, instead of having an enormous, thick, large canopy, which in a strong wind is like a big sail on a yacht, it's going to blow over, when you have that canopy opened up, the tree's more likely to bend more gently in strong wind, so it's less likely to have snapped limbs that can fall off, hit the BMW, put a hole through a wall, etc., etc. And so that's an important part of that process. So you can see there they've gone in and they've removed some of those internal branches. And again, when you go through those beautiful areas, and I think of Fraser Avenue, we all know famously Fraser Avenue, lemon-scented gums along there. Again, each one of those has been managed so that they can be retained into those really high-profile spots. That's not what you do for a tree. Going in there and butchering the poor thing. And you can see most people, and it's normally blokes, when do blokes go out there and start pruning their trees? There's something they get in the mail that triggers them into this frenzy. The green waste notice. So out they go and they hang off a limb with a chainsaw, and there's probably a strong correlation between getting the green waste notice and massive numbers of people going into emergency with fingers lopped off, etc. Because they go out there and they butcher their trees because they think that's one way they can get their money back from their council, is to have this enormous pile of green waste out the front. It shouldn't be called green waste, it should be called green gold, because all those branches that you've hacked off that tree, probably at the wrong time of the year, and leave all these wounds, which incidentally, then disease gets into the tree, which compromises and weakens the tree. So if a tree does fall, it's generally because it's not been managed well. But if you put that enormous pile of green waste out the front, it's full of nutrients. And you probably purchase those nutrients as fertilizer and compost and manure. The plant's taken them up, turn them into leaves, fruit, flower and bark, and you butcher it, hack it away, and it goes out as a pile out the front. And guess what happens to those enormous piles dotted through your community? They basically get purchased by some giant company that composts them, turns them into compost, puts them into pretty bags, and you buy them again from Bunnings. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And again, you can see what the tree's trying to do. It's had a wound and it's tried to put in a new growth on the side. So when we get a tree butcher, otherwise known as a tree lopper, never let a tree lopper near your house. They probably don't even have a driver's license, let alone any license to manage trees. So they hack the tree regrows, and we think the tree liked it. Well, it's just trying to recover. But what it now has, it has its growth at the side of the trunk. So it's now on the side, strong wind, again it can snap, break. You've basically built an internal deformity in that tree. So that's why they often struggle once they've been butchered that way. And there are examples of it everywhere. Okay, so some of the most important things, and this really builds on what Matt was saying before, we need to try and minimize that traffic around the tree. Now, traffic is everything from parking the cars, putting paving, because if the soil gets compacted, you're getting rid of the air and you're getting rid of those root areas. So the root system starts to be compromised, and that's what can really make differences for them. As Matt said, make that perimeter around that tree as wide as possible, because we forget that what we see growing above the ground is really fundamentally a reflection and dependent on what's below the ground. The wider, more healthy that root system, the stronger that tree will go. And tunnelling, so as Matt said, for our development, we made sure we kept everything above that height and we just dug underneath. And you can now get companies that will tunnel rather than butchering through the roots of the trees. We built a land bridge, so you'll see with some of the slides from my place, we're building two of Matt's beautiful apartments in the back garden, and our gorgeous jacaranda is the centerpiece. So we built a land bridge over those roots. So we put a nice mulch layer, so when we were bringing in compactors and dingoes, etc., we weren't compacting the soil. And for my gorgeous tree, which we called Jackie, because she's a jacaranda, we've put inserted tree pills, so you can get arborists and they can come and inject pills into the sides of the tree. They're like Viagra for trees. There you go, not that anyone knows what that is. And this is an example of what can be done with trees that are struggling. This is the same tree. They've gone in, assessed it, and then done stem injections to actually look at the recovery of that tree. And that's, again, the same tree, post-treatment. So there are lots of things that you can do to help those trees. And remember, this is green infrastructure. And that tree, as Matt alluded to, you can get calibrated scientific inquiries that will tell you a tree like that could be worth well over $70,000. So it's worth putting the time and energy into looking after them. All right, some plants, the right plants in the right place for the right reasons. And if we haven't said before, all of this is going to be made available on the City of Vincent website. So if you don't feel like taking photos, you can do that. As Matt said before, we really want to shade and screen ourselves. Remember, the morning and the setting sun on a stinking hot day is low. So if we're going to get a 45-degree day, you know that by even 9 in the morning, it's probably 30 degrees. And if that sun is hitting a window, that's heating up that room. Remember, glass, single pane glass, has virtually no ability to buffer us against the extremes of temperature. We think because it's stopping the wind and the rain, it's somehow buffering us from changes in temperature. Not that case at all. So we need to screen those sides. And these are some of the smaller trees that will fit within these spaces. And then as our houses get bigger and our lots get smaller, we now have lots of narrow spaces. That doesn't mean that you just put charcoal grey bricks up to the edge. There are lots of species that have either been bred or have been tweaked or honed so they actually grow as what's called more of an apical shape. Apical means they grow more this way rather than that way. And if you don't have the room, don't put in a plant that's going to cause you lots of problems. So some of my favourites, the lily pillies, there's varieties now that just, I don't know what's in them, but they just don't grow wider than that. And they can grow to 3 to 4 metres in height. Beautiful. They have lovely flowers and the fruit's edible if you're really struggling. But the point is there are lots of gorgeous plants that you can fit into this space. And then some of our beautiful deciduous trees. Now, I love deciduous trees. The most important thing in this part of the world is you are living in a low chill area. Does everyone know what that means, low chill? So deciduous trees, they work completely differently from our evergreens like our eucalypts. They get triggered by how many hours of chill, which is temperatures below 7.2 degrees to be specific. So we live in a low chill area. We get less than 200 hours per year below 7 degrees. So when it's really cold one morning, just remember you've only got a few more hours of that to go. And don't complain to anyone in Fridgetown, otherwise known as Bridgetown, about how cold it is in Perth, because this is actually low chill, whereas somewhere like Bridgetown is a medium to high chill. And it's the reason why you'll never see things like cherry trees growing in Perth. It's just not cold enough. They don't get enough of the cold temperature and they don't grow properly. They get diseased and they just won't live. So for you living in this part of the world, by all means put those deciduous trees between the northeast and the northwest, but go for low chill varieties. So go to really good nurseries like L&B Tree Farm and good nurseries like Dawson's because they have great staff. So you'll be able to go in and say, this is where I live, show them photos of where you are and the soil type that you have, and you can start to choose beautiful plants. And remember, the City of Vincent is at the forefront of so much of this sustainability, and they have amazing lists of species that will work for your area as well. Okay, let's have a look at some design examples. Okay, so this is the beautiful apartments that are being built at my place. I really wish the roof was on. I really wish the roof was on, but it's not on yet. So we're getting lots of wet patches in our houses. But these are Matt's gorgeous designs. And if anyone has followed my journey with my place, we had the Hammer Hill Sustainable Home, which we retrofitted from a 1950s cottage, which had all the energy efficiency of a tent. So we changed that from a 1.5-star home to an 8-star home by lots of retrofits. And then we had this beautiful back garden, which was 800 square metres. And the zoning changed for me. So as Melinda said, when the zoning changes, that can make big differences. So for me in the city of Coburn, the zoning changed from R20, which is 20 residences per hectare, to R3040, which is essentially almost doubling the number of houses that we can have. So I desperately wanted to show how we could do infill in a way where we didn't sacrifice the families and the homes to just build something that I've already pilloried already. How can we use that as an opportunity to build community, to build something nourishing and protect and enhance what we love about our place, which is the gardens, etc. But this is what we see all the time. That dreaded excavator out there smashing the hell out of it. And you think about how much is lost. We have some of the most amazing structural timbers on the planet. Jarrah, world class, just top of its game, and yet we allow these things to just smash it up, and if we're lucky it gets sold as firewood. It's insane. And so much of that is just destroyed to be replaced by that. But we can, and then that's
this
what we
is
get
Chris's
in
house.
place.
No, no.
You know, and we talked about the isolation and what is one of the great scourges of humanity. Well, what's this saying about these poor people living here surrounded by artificial turf? The only thing missing is a moat, really. It just seems like the world is against them. The roller shutters. So there is no connectivity. There's no opportunity to create those nourishing spaces that we need to survive as human beings. And again, we roll this out on a bigger scale. Which suburb do you want to be in? And we've all seen on the news the heat waves that are inflicting parts of the world, and we're no different. We are being hit by climate change faster than almost anywhere else on the planet. We're the fastest drying part of the world's driest continent here. If you grew up in Perth, our rainfall was all that fed our dams for the water that we drink. Now it's less than 7% of the water that comes from your taps is rainwater. The reason why we haven't run out of water is we're rich, and we come at a time in human history where we can afford massive desalination plants and groundwater extraction. That's why you haven't heard about the fact we're running out of water, but we are, simply because our climate, and it's hard to really illustrate that when it's pouring with rain out. I get it. I won't point that way.
No, don't look out there.
But have a look at these new subdivisions. So this suburb with no trees will be anywhere from 5 to maybe 12 degrees hotter. So if it's going to be 45 degrees, which suburb do you want to be living in? And which suburb is going to demand more power consumption? Okay, so that's a little bit about the start of our place. That's our front garden. And I'm going to get Matt to talk about it very soon. So this is what we had. We had the existing home, a granny flat, and what we wanted to do was build 2 new apartments to build a community in that space. And that's where Matt comes in.
Excellent. So yeah, that is what Chris had. Actually, you bought your house like this, didn't you? So yeah, existing house, 35 square metre granny flat, old asbestos garage from the 50s, and beautiful big jacaranda tree. So that was what Chris bought. And there's a few ways you could develop that. This is one that we probably all understand very well, is the good old battle axe. Driveway down the side, clear the rear block and put a second dwelling at the back. Option 2, clear the block completely and put in four dwellings, because it's R40 on 800 square metres.
And each one, of course, we've sacrificed all of our garden and everything that's wonderful about the place.
Lots of space given to the cars there. Option 3 is a much better scenario where you're potentially keeping the tree. This is an idea that Chris didn't do, but potentially could have, is sort of absolutely maximise the number of dwellings on that site. So that's doing something new, but still, say, keeping the tree.
And we would have sacrificed the house, so the house.
So the house would go on that one.
But option 4, guess which one we went with? Ta-da!
Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? Because just a quick glance at that, and you see how underdeveloped that looks. Really, I mean, there's not actually much new building footprint on that site. The wonderful tree, of course, is kept. And what Melinda said before is this is not green. What's the green title? Is it called?
It's built strata.
Built strata, because there's no road to the rear dwellings. The parking is actually out the front, which is you're allowed to do that. It's something that it's probably a little bit rarer in town planning, but it's in policy, isn't it, Mel? You can do it. It's not that radical. It's just not tried that often. And then what we've done to overcome titles is we've got this shared piece of shared titles, so that, shock horror, you actually walk 20 metres to your house rather than drive to your front door and just give all the land to parking. And that's the mind change. And we do have a bit of a giggle at it, the idea of walking maybe with an umbrella in the rain, but really it's embedded in our subconscious that we must get to inside our house in a car. It's just these things are cultural, they become very powerful. It's a bit like our suburban sprawl. You actually don't think, they seem crazy, but we still do it. So it's just a little interesting point there.
And I'm not a builder or an architect. People talk to me about, oh, you know, how amazing was it to build? And I said, I have 10 thumbs, so I write the checks. So I come from a very different perspective. So the two things that have really amazed me is people think that we've done something illegal. They almost sidle up and they whisper, so how did you do this? And I said, this is totally approved. There's nothing that we've done illegal. So it's really about, we're the most compliant race on the planet too, apparently, which is odd because we're a bunch of convicts. But, yeah. Or maybe it's not odd. But this idea of decoupling is really important. And then having the courage, if you like, and that was Matt saying, I really think you could build small. And again, knowing the stats that 70% of people don't want an enormous house. So you can have the confidence of knowing that building small apartments decoupled from a driveway, people will want it, particularly when you sell the concept of actually being able to walk into a beautiful space. And we've had two responses to the way we do this. One is they come in and one lady burst into tears, and it wasn't because Matt said something rude. She just came into a space where there was a gorgeous tree and you could see this garden. Another person said, I would never invest in this. There are too many leaves, there are too many, and they're the people that want artificial turf and plastic trees, and that's fine if you want that kind of thing. Getting a little bit closer, as Matt was saying before, we needed to protect this gorgeous jacaranda. So we made sure that the trench went down the side. So Matt talked about that before. That's the combined services trench. That's water and power and sewage. And then basically we made sure that we made that footprint so that we could protect that gorgeous tree, because there's no point having it there as the centerpiece if it's dying. And an arborist friend of mine is coming next week, and we're going to look at the tree, do some pathology to see if there's any virulent things in the soil that are compromising the tree, and do any stem injections to protect it. And there's Matt's beautiful design. So there's the beautiful jacaranda in the foreground, and there's the beautiful apartments that are being built, and that's just the edge of the granny flat that we have existing on the property. Then all of this becomes the common area. So as I said, we've had lots of home opens and tours through, and there's our beautiful jacaranda, which incidentally had been butchered by a tree lopper about 20 years ago, long before we had tenure. And you can see they just hacked all the branches at that height. So the plant regrows, but you can see the wounds in the tree, which now means there's compromise in that tree. So in a really strong wind, it could have a branch that snaps. So it's about managing that. So this is the build. Do you want to talk a little bit about the build? And you haven't seen these slides, but...
No. I suppose the things that are really a little bit unique about this is that actual building is that it is passive house standard. So it's got the membranes, the heat recovery, ventilation, which did cost a little bit more, but not crazy dollars. Secondly, it had a bit of fun with the jarrah. We got that from a demolition site and had it cut and put on the outside as like it's not a waterproof thing, it's more like a skin that's just an aesthetic thing, but it was wonderful to use something from a demolition site that is absolutely stunning and it wasn't, the actual production of that wasn't overly expensive. So that was a bit of experimenting. Chris is always up for, trying something different. But it really is quite beautiful now that it's nearly finished. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun.
And so there's the ground floor apartments. So a little bit of history to this too. So there's two apartments. So the ground floor apartment is 65 square metres.
65 and 45, I think.
And then the upstairs apartment is 45 square metres.
2 and 1 bedroom.
And then that's the balcony for the upstairs apartment, which is literally sitting under the beautiful jacaranda.
Tree house. It's really fantastic. Actually, we had a branch that was in the way of the eaves. We just noticed that Chris and I up there, we're having our cup of tea, our weekly cuppa up there, and we go, what are we going to do? And I said, Chris, why don't we just get them to cut the eaves back and so we can keep that limb. So sure enough, the builders chopped them back, and I thought that was quite symbolic, like the buildings sort of setting off the tree rather than smashing the tree over. It was just a nice little moment.
And look at all that beautiful cladding. So that's, as we call it, the stairway to heaven. So there's the downstairs apartment, the upstairs, and this is all double glazed, so small windows to the east and the west, again following those principles, massive, as big as possible windows to the north, and then lots and lots of insulation.
Indeed.
And there's those beautiful north-facing double glazed windows. We went with a local glazer, Canon, who've done beautiful work. It's really, really lovely. So you can see there's the view looking out over the trees, and there's our house behind there. So it really has this courtyard feel about it now. And there's the view from the balcony where Matt and I, wherever we can, we sit up there. And that's our office. So that was the original shed. That was an old asbestos shed. And I think, I didn't keep a photo in there, but we took the old asbestos shed, took off the asbestos, and it had the beautiful framing. And Matt's suggestion was, why don't we turn that into a space? It then became our office. I think he was plumbing for that all along.
Yeah, you've got to think ahead to survive in this world.
So there's that. So this is all the shared space. So the other thing about this building, on what Melinda will talk a little bit about, so the built strata means that each one that's here, so there's the 4 families, my family, then the 2 that have purchased these blocks, and then the granny flat. So they all have their own title, if you like, but it's built strata, which means they have their own private lot, and then we share the common area, which is the jacaranda, some of the veggie gardens, and some of those other parts. So to me, we have this aversion from that style of living. People assume it means we're all going to be wearing orange overalls and eating every meal together. It's not a kibbutz. What it is a space where you have your own private space. If you like Matt and you like doing your yoga in the nude, that's fine. You do that in your own private space.
Can't go without that.
No. Then when you walk through the door into the shared space, you ask before you take your clothes off to do your downward dog. It's important. Remember that. So to me, it really adds that whole level of value to it. And what we're trying to create is a community. So that shared space there, the office, is now a space where Matt and I have our businesses. We have interns from Murdoch University, etc. We have meetings there, and then the people that live here can use that space at different times as well. So it's trying to give more than what we traditionally get. And of course, that gorgeous jacaranda is working tirelessly to moderate the environment in that space. So those houses are going to be cooler in summer and warmer in winter. The tree's probably not going to help it keep warmer, I have to be honest, but certainly cooler in the summertime. Any comments or anything you'd like to add about that?
I was just going to say, it's interesting, isn't it, post-COVID, that a lot of people obviously have been working at home a lot more. Even bigger companies are realising, ironically, that people are being more productive at home rather than in office, even though they're not supervised, which is an interesting thing. So yeah, the idea of having really beautiful spaces to work on residential properties is actually quite relevant, and yeah, it's something that I think isn't just going to be the oddity, it's actually going to become more of a norm.